Good morning and welcome to Word on the Grid. This morning I'm joined by Theresa Bell. Theresa is a main board member of Arcus FM, a private equity-backed facilities and technical services organisation. So welcome, Theresa.
Thank you.
It's been such a long time. We've been trying to get this in the diary. I think you're one of the busiest leaders I've tried to get on to this podcast. So I'm absolutely delighted to have you on this boiling hot June morning. Before we get into your career and leadership, I'd love to just start by asking, who is Theresa Bell?
Oh, well, that's a big question. That could probably take up most of the podcast, depending on your perspective. I always think that I'm pretty boring, and I really struggle with like personal things generally, in terms of, because I don't think I'm very interesting. But who am I? So I grew up in Bedfordshire, but I'm a Glaswegian, and what that gives me is a balance and a mix of cultures, of growing up in the southeast of England, but having that kind of gritty northern, no nonsense culture. That's where I'm from. That's where my family are from. That's where most of them still live. I lost my accent when I was very young, but I'm a proper Scot. People don't always know that about me, and yeah, I live in Swindon now, with my family. My husband and I have a blended family. We have 6 children. The youngest is now 27, so it gets a bit easier once they get to this sort of age. Generally, there is hope most of the time. So it's a really busy life. Big families, always lots of things going on, with lots of children and grandchildren, and you know, a career in facilities management, which, you know, to your point earlier about being busy, I'm not sure that's a good thing, to be perceived as so busy that we can't get an hour in to have a chat. And it's something I'm always trying to work on, but there's always just so much to do, and it's really hard to spread yourself in the right areas between your family and your work, which, you know, work is really important to me, as are my family.
I was hoping, though, that during the sort of few months that we tried to get this scheduled, Theresa, you might have had a holiday as well, or something in between.
I did have a few
it wasn't
days.
all work.
No, I did manage to have a few days off. But a lot of work, and that's predominantly to do with facilities is a really busy industry. Our business in particular is growing at a rate of knots, and there is so much going on in the business, and we are a private equity organisation, and so the blend of those things, I think, make it, you know, a really busy time for all of us. But it's exciting as well. You know, it's not tiring, it's not boring. You know, the pace of the hamster wheel is there, and I'm on it, but I'm happy to be on it because I'm doing a lot on it, so I'm enjoying it.
It's amazing. I loved hearing about the story of Arcus FM when we first met, and the acquisitions and the integrations that you've led. But before we sort of move into, you know, your career now, I'd love to go back and thank you for sharing that you are a Glaswegian, and you haven't always spent your life down in the southern parts of the UK. I just assumed you were from the home counties and had spent your life down here. But can we go back and talk a little bit more about your upbringing and the origin, and you know, just a bit about family life? Are you part of you've got a big family now, a big blended family, but were you part of a big family growing up? What's the kind of backdrop to your childhood?
So I have 2 sisters and a brother. There's 4 of us. My mum was one of 9. My dad was one of 14. Wow. And so, yeah, but having moved when I was quite young, and in the 70s, you know, it was much more letter writing than phone calls. And so we weren't particularly closely connected to our families once we left Glasgow. We did have some family more close. But so despite having over 90 first cousins, We don't have close relationships with all of them just because of distance. And when we moved, that it wasn't as it is now. It wasn't so easy to keep in touch. And so we grew up, my dad moved to Bedfordshire to work for the London Brick Company when I was quite young. And we just grew up in a little village in Bedfordshire. It was chaotic. It was hard. I don't come from a particularly privileged background. I'm very working class, and that cut me open, and that's who I am at my core. Again, people hear my accent and often might think I'm middle class or home counties, homegrown, all of that kind of stuff, because it's easy for people to make assumptions about people, isn't it? But no, very very tough childhood in some respects. Certainly not privileged, and have embraced that as I've got older, and it keeps me grounded, and I certainly now am in a position where I do enjoy privilege, and for lots of different reasons, but I see it every day, and I'm really grateful for it when I have it, and conscious of it all the time.
Yeah, and have really worked hard to get there. And did both your parents work? Obviously, having 3 brothers and sisters plus you, that's 4 children, a very busy household. Did mum work as well?
Yeah.
Yeah.
She did things like she worked in a care home doing the laundry. She worked in the working men's club, did the cleaning. She had to get up at 5 o'clock in the morning and go off and do that, and then come home and get us ready for school. Dad worked in the brickworks, and then later he worked as a builder or a labourer. So yeah, ordinary working class roles.
And what sort of messages did you have about leadership and power and authority and things as you were growing up? Were there people around you that were in leadership roles?
I think these are the sorts of things I reflect on, actually. I think that people in those sort of roles when I was growing up that I had access to and that I would see on a daily basis were perhaps teachers or priests or police people in the police force that we would know in the village. I certainly didn't really know anybody that was a company director. The closest thing to that would have been the local landlord of the pub, or there was there still is a beautiful restaurant in the village where I grew up, and I worked there as a teenager, and the owner of the restaurant, that they were the kind of people at that point that I would have seen as had done very well and were in leadership roles. I wasn't involved in any way in anything to do with corporate corporate life, and neither were my friends. So there was just a sense of just very ordinary life. It makes me feel old and sound old probably, but growing up in that kind of environment in a village where everybody knew everybody, and London Canary Wharf wasn't built, and those ideas of corporate life, you would only see them on the odd film, that didn't really understand what it all meant and what it all was, and certainly wasn't connected to it in any way.
How did you get on at school? Did you enjoy school?
No, I had a really hard time at school, and I didn't do as well as I should have done, and I had to go back when I was an adult, and I went and did an MBA, and that was really helpful for me because I was really concerned and anxious about doing the test to see if I was clever enough to do an MBA, and so when I was accepted onto the programme, that was a big deal for me. And then when I completed the MBA, that was a big deal for me also, because it felt as though I had finally achieved my education to a standard that I knew I was capable of. But there were a lot of things going on when I was a teenager that meant I didn't want to go to school so much. And so, I didn't do as well as I could have done.
Well, it's an incredible achievement anyway to do an MBA, but I can imagine for you that was, it must have felt almost out of reach, having sort of gone through your education and not gone to university, and started working at a young age. So when did you? And I'm interested to know, even like the very first jobs that we did as almost pretty much children still. But when did you first work? When would you describe your first job?
It's very cliche. I was 13 and it was a paper round, and
Exactly the same as me. Yeah.
yeah. But then I had 2 paper rounds. So then I did 7 days a week, up at 5 every day. Then I worked part-time doing someone's garden for them. So I used to do 4 hours a week in the ladies' garden. Then I had 3 families that I did babysitting for at 13. You wouldn't do that now. Then I worked in the local pub, and I used to clean all the shelves behind the bar and stack all the sweets on the sweet counter. And then I went to work in the wash-up at the local restaurant. And actually, apart from the odd few weeks here and there because of having children, haven't stopped working since. But there was a point when I was 13 and 14 where I had about 6 jobs.
I can completely resonate with that. And like you, as a teenager, I was obsessed about the independence of having my own money. And that I have such fond memories of doing the paper round. And did you have the situation where at Christmas it would be so exciting because people would leave little envelopes out with, coins in there for little tips for you and things like that? I mean, that was one of the things.
No, I didn't know that was a thing.
It was the highlight of my year. It was the absolute highlight of my year. And I used to rope. Mine was the afternoon paper round, so it was the Daily Echo. So in the summer holidays, it didn't come in till probably sort of late morning, sometimes lunchtime, and all my friends would be wanting to go down the beach, and obviously for me to go with them. And I'd say, well, why don't you help me do my paper round? We'll split it and then we can all get down the beach earlier. So I'd rope them all into doing my paper round with me.
I love that.
Yeah. But no, the highlight of the year was the Christmas tips. Oh, it was amazing. It was so exciting. And some people were so generous. Yeah, it's just interesting, isn't it, now? Because I think if you said to your kids now that we started out having a paper round, it's just not a thing now, is it? Somebody going around on their BMX delivering papers.
And they were so heavy. And I used to do the Sunday papers. And I was a tiny little girl with these, and I had 2 sacks, and I had them crossed over me. And I don't know how I balanced on my bike, but just getting toward the end of it, I'll never forget how the pain in my shoulders and getting towards the end of it when it got lighter was such a relief.
Oh, it's no wonder that we're all achy now, hey? You just wouldn't. It wouldn't be allowed now, would it, Theresa? Getting 12-year-old girls to go around with those, sort of 15-kilo bags. But yeah, different life, hey. So amazing. So it's clear that your parents, being so hardworking, obviously really instilled that in you from such an early age. So where did you first kind of get the inclination that you would go on to become a board member in nearly a £300 million private equity backed facilities firm? It's just incredible.
Well, I was a bit slow on the uptake, I think. I knew that I wanted to do something and to be successful. I was working in catering because I had worked at the local restaurant, and the chef there, the head chef, was lovely, and he taught me to cook. And it wasn't a Michelin star restaurant, but it was a rosette restaurant. And so my mum was a great cook, but she made shepherd's pie and chili con carne and all of those nice home cooked meals. But I went and I learned how to prep sweetbreads and langoustines, and I found out what an avocado was, and I remember these things vividly and this learning that I had. So I'd gone to do the pot wash, and the chef used to get me doing all kinds of weird and wonderful things, and if they were short staffed and busy on a Saturday night, he would get me to help with the starters or the sweet trolley or these types of things. And so I had a bit of an interest in food, and it was probably the first most eye-opening thing that I had, where food till that moment was as I've just described, and it was very nice, thank you very much, but I wasn't that interested in it. And then I became interested in it, and so when I did leave school, I went to work for a company called Grand Metropolitan Retailing, who eventually were rolled up into Compass. But I went on a management training program with them, and I was working in Burnley Inns, which for people that don't remember them are a bit like a beef eater now, and I was working over 100 hours a week in that job, because I had to be the assistant manager and learn everything about how to run this business. But I also had to be available to do any job in the restaurant at the drop of a hat. And it was a 250-seater restaurant. It was busy all day, every day. And I used to work 100 hours a week for £2.61 an hour. But I don't think I got paid for the 100 hours even then. But I learned so many interesting things. So I learned in particular the commercial aspects of running that business, which have always stayed with me. I would finish work on a Sunday night at 10:30, 11 o'clock. Everyone else would go home. I would go and do the stock take and finish at 2 o'clock in the morning and be in the freezer on my own for an hour at midnight. And then back in the office at 7 a.m. on the Monday to then process the results of the stock take and to work out how we did the previous week. And if we did well and hit our GP, then great. And if we didn't, what are we going to do about it? And it was the beginning of feeling accountable for a result and for performance, and understanding all of the different things, all of the component parts of making a business make money. And I started that when I was 17. And had great fun doing it, but it just gave me a grounding in business. Then I had some children very young, and couldn't go back to that, and so I decided to go into contract catering, which was my start in facilities management in the 90s. So like most people in facilities, I didn't grow up dreaming of a career in facilities. I probably was dreaming of a career in food and hospitality because I loved it, and I did that for a few years, and then went into more full facilities management. And so that was the big grounding job really that opened my eyes to big organisations and management and leadership. And in my leadership journey, I could recall as many experiences there that have shaped me as I could sat in a boardroom.
Such a good grounding though in business, I think, working in hospitality and catering. Mm-hmm. It teaches you hard work, it teaches you customer service, and that the customer is at the heart of everything. Mm-hmm. And I think the people that have even sort of bar jobs and working in hotels and restaurants and things, it really does teach you that the job isn't done until you've actually finished up after that last customer has gone, and you actually have quite little control over that, don't you, as well? I mm-hmm. think as well. So yeah. There's no expectation of my shift is 6 till 11 o'clock at night, because you've got the sort of the after processes once that last customer's left, and mm-hmm. so you finish when you finish. Mm-hmm. And I bet then that's sort of given you that taken that sort of lesson through your career to date, and taught you so much. So when you had your children, did you spend time then doing sort of other jobs that you could fit in around also being mm-hmm. mum and things like that? And
definitely.
So when did you then start sort of really focusing on your career again?
So I went to work for Gardner Merchant in a contract catering role in 1995. And I went to be the general manager of a large building society, looking after all of the food for that contract and those employees. And it was just really there. We started to have I started to have more exposure to the corporate world, and everything that I'd already learned previously, particularly in the Burnians environment, gave me a really good grounding for softer skills around people. I was terrible at it to begin with, and I didn't know how to do it. I'm the eldest of my 4 siblings, and quite often would be in charge while my mum and dad were at work. But I had no skills for getting them to do anything. And so they would tell you that I'm bossy. I would tell you that I was just really awful at managing them because I didn't know how to. And so, that continued as my style for a while. And then you start to reflect and learn that that's not working. Why is that not working? How are you coming across? And so, in Gardener Merchant, I really started to learn more about leadership, management, and my own personal style, and went on this whole journey for years and years in terms of getting that style, getting myself, trying to be just me, getting rid of the bossy big sister rep that I had for many years. And so that was quite hard. But the Gardener Merchant piece, when I started there, that was my first exposure really to a very large corporate organisation. And from there, I've worked my way up through other FM organisations and actually done a full circle moment back to Arcus. I've gone right through into some global roles with CBRE, and then have come full circle back to a UK-based smaller organisation, which really feels like home, that I'm really enjoying actually. But all of those experiences through that whole career have completely given me different ways of looking at things, different perspectives, and have helped me for every aspect of my role for today.
It's funny, isn't it? It really resonates with me as well, what you're saying about being having that label as the bossy big sister. I had the same, and I've heard many a story, and I have memories myself, as I'm sure you do, of looking after and being the responsible one, and family members saying, oh, when you were younger, you'd be the one who would volunteer to take your little sister to the toilet when you're out for lunch, and and this kind of connotation of, as you say, being bossy does stay with you. And I think that kind of, you carry it throughout your adulthood and your career, but it doesn't define who you are. And I think there is a point when you become an adult and you start to lead people that you have to remember that having that responsibility as a child, it was almost put on you, wasn't it? And it doesn't define your leadership style. You don't have to lead with that, that type of authority by telling people and being dictatorial just because you were put in that position as a child. Mm-hmm. Actually, there was no other choice as a child. You had to take on that role. And I know for certain that obviously, moving forward now, that you'll have found your authentic leadership style, because the way I found you and was so keen to connect with you was because you won a leadership award last year with Arcus, didn't you? And that was something that really attracted me to speak to you, as well as other things that I'd found out and heard about you, and endorsements I'd seen. So were there any mentors along the way, Theresa? Were there any people that you aspired towards and tried to emulate in terms of leadership style?
Yeah, I think there was formal and informal mentoring. As I got more senior, you get access then, don't you, to development. And as you get into, different leadership courses, you start to have the idea of mentorship. And so, yeah, there were certainly mentors that I had, and still do. I'm a huge advocate of mentoring. I think it's really important, and I do a lot of mentoring myself. So yeah, they've certainly shaped me. And again, for me, it's about variety. It's about having different mentors for different things, and also taking the good things from people that you admire and aspire to, and thinking, actually, I think that's a really good idea, and I quite like that way of doing stuff or being. But also then the other side of that is learning the things that don't work so well, and the styles that don't work so well, and you go on this journey of finding out who you are as a leader, and part of that is what you don't want to be and who you don't want to be like. And some of those experiences are the things that shape you the most, because you don't always deal with things in the best way when you're in certain situations, and I think you learn from those situations, and then you're more equipped for the next time you might be in a challenging situation with a challenging person in a leadership role. And so I think that you have to have both. You have to have positive and negative role models, and you have to go through some negative experiences to then come through that with the experiences and the toolkit that you need to be able to deal with some of those things that you perhaps struggled with when you were younger.
I couldn't agree more, and I love you pointing out that it's still useful to have negative role models, and actually some role models can be really good for technical learnings, can't they, in terms of commercial acumen and sort of, I suppose, theoretical leadership skills, but actually that their style might not be authentic. And I think sometimes when you try and emulate somebody's style that doesn't feel authentic to you, it can really end up compromising your values, and you get this almost disconnect inside of you. And I've had that before, but it doesn't mean that mentor wasn't a good mentor in other ways. Perhaps they can teach you something technically. So yeah, no, that's really agree with that. So how would you describe your leadership style?
It's almost just been pared back. I try to listen more than I talk, and one of the great things that I've learned from my current boss, Chris, and I've got great takeaways from all of the people that I worked with. But one of the things that Chris has been helping me with is holding a problem and not jumping to a conclusion or a solution. And I guess that's been so important over the last 2 or 3 years, because as you become more senior, the problems become more complex. And there generally isn't a right answer. There's generally just an answer, or the least wrong answer. And so in order to deal with things like that, you have to become more serious, more reflective, more calm, and you have to take time, and you have to think more. And so that's probably who I am at the moment. I do get excited still, don't get me wrong. And by excited, I get generally excited by success. And people that work with me will tell you Theresa likes to win. And Theresa
I was about to say winning.
Theresa struggles if we don't win.
That's your commercial background, though, Theresa. You've done a lot of sort of external sort of customer facing leadership roles, haven't you? So your background's very, very commercial. And I think that tendency, that sense of urgency and that pace can often come from being external, because when there's a problem for a customer or a prospective customer, we have this this desire to sort it out really quickly, don't we? And I think that I very, very similar to you. But
Yeah.
I mean, something I've always sort of said to my teams over the years is even when it is a customer challenge or a customer wants something from you, nobody says you have to respond immediately. You are allowed time to reflect. You don't have to give an answer straight away. And actually, you need to go away and think about all the components around this request or this challenge problem. So I think that is amazing advice. And obviously, yeah, it's definitely true that you end up having some very, very complex challenges the more the higher up the chain you get.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's kind of the technical aspect of my leadership style, I suppose. The Theresa's part of it is coming from the background that I came from. One of the things that I realised is a lot of people are invisible, and a lot of people don't know how to make themselves visible. And so one of the things I get really excited about and feels like a win in a different way is when I help somebody to really progress in their career, and when I see them doing really well. And so that's something that I've really embraced over the last few years. And I get quite involved with a lot of different people in terms of career advice, support, telling them what I can see, where I can see them going. Quite often I'm having conversations with people that think that, I'm talking about pipe dreams, but I can see in people, and I suppose this is my superpower if I have one. I'm quite good at seeing and understanding people. I can see them, and I can see what they can do and what they can achieve and where they can go and how they could get there. And I almost feel like I'm helping them navigate and showing them routes and ways and teaching them the game, right? Because the other thing about all of this corporate stuff is it's all a game. It's a job and it's important and it's my livelihood and everyone's livelihood, but also it's a game. And there was a moment in my career where I realized this is a game, and if somebody teaches me the rules, I'll play it really well. And so I'm quite open about that with people that I support. Like, this is the game, learn how to play the game and you'll do well at the game. If you're in the game and you don't know what the game is, then what are you going to do? How are you going to be successful? So that's a lot about me. That's how I am with people, and trying to, I just love seeing people that haven't been seen. I feel like an antique collector that's found, that something really precious in a car boot sale when I find a gem, and then they just fly. Their careers are flying because they've got the right things around them, because they already had the ingredients needed.
Yes.
They just needed to be put in the right place with the right support and the right belief in them.
It is so exciting finding somebody who has incredible potential. Did you ever have somebody who was backing you in that way?
I did. I had. It wasn't very successful in that. Having mentors is one thing. I then had a sponsor a number of years ago, and sponsorship is something slightly different. And again, really important if you can get it and understand it. And I think that this person was a huge advocate and really sponsored me really well. But it wasn't successful. Neither of us got out of it what we wanted, but that wasn't because of either of us. That was because of the environment that we were in at the time and what was going on in the broader business. And so they were trying to get me into a different role. They could see me. They knew what I was capable of. Others couldn't. And so I suppose that it was nice to have that sponsorship, though, and to meet with that person regularly and to have that confidence from them. That was really great, actually, and really important to me, because around that time, I guess, was when I probably really became confident and stopped feeling like, I know people always talk about imposter syndrome. We all have it. Well, I don't. But I did. And so I guess around that time, I stopped having it. And I just believed in myself, because you get to a point where you're successful and you're doing really well and you think, well, actually, I must be doing something right, and I must be quite good at this stuff, even if I don't think I am. I must be. So,
yeah, and that your confidence suddenly grows significantly, doesn't it? Because you just have to think back and think, well, I wouldn't be here if I wasn't doing an okay job. So I'll just keep backing myself, believing in myself. And when did you first become a board member, Theresa? When did you first take on that first proper executive role?
So when I joined Arcus, and it was one of the reasons to join Arcus was to join the board. I was in a very, very large global organisation. I could have stayed there and tried to get on the board. I might have had to move to America. I didn't really want to do that. But I wanted to be on a board. I wanted to have that experience, and I'm really glad that I've done it. It's a really good experience, and I'm really enjoying it. And so so with Arcus, I mean, I was a statutory director previously, but it wasn't quite the same as this, where it's a traditional board in the sense that we get together, we have board meetings, and we run the business.
Proper seat at the table.
Yeah.
And I think it's a challenge, isn't it, to go from a functional director where you're responsible for an area of a business to having material responsibility across the whole organisation, even if you still maintain an area that you're more responsible for, such as commercial or operations or finance. But when you get to that board level, you have an involvement in and an interest in everything, don't you?
We do, absolutely.
And it's a really sort of quite a close, intimate team of people. Are you? Is it quite balanced, diverse? Your board at Arcus, Theresa? Is that? I mean, what's the industry like in terms of diversity at board level?
I think across the industry, it's around 20%. It's some businesses do better than others. Our board is very small, and so there is only me that's female. Our Arcus operating board is more, I think, 40-50% female. But as an industry, it's one of our biggest challenges, from engineers all the way up to the boardroom. But there are lots of very successful females doing very well in a lot of big FM businesses now. So it's definitely changing.
I read a really disappointing stat only this morning that a different industry, but one of which one of the guests on Word on the Grid podcast has been sort of, really following over and being a huge ambassador for in the industry in terms of promoting, diversity and inclusion at the top. But it was reported that the boards were made up of, last year it was 75% men, and the stat has increased this year to 78%. So it's going in the wrong way. Disappointing to read that only this morning. So, well, I think we've been chatting away for sort of, over 35, 40 minutes. And I'm really keen to kind of finish with understanding something that I ask all of the executives that I interview. If you could go back to chatting to Theresa when she was 15, is there anything that you would specifically want to say to her to encourage her, as you do now, as a sponsor and a mentor with all the sort of aspiring leaders that you talk to nowadays? What's the message you'd give 15-year-old Theresa?
Well, it turned out that I'm very resilient, and I would want her to know that she was very resilient and should have stayed at school and done her A-levels and gone to uni, and she could have retired quicker.
Brilliant. I love that. Well, thank you so much. It's been amazing catching up with you. And I hope that, you know, after all these weeks and weeks of hard work and being busy, although it's not the goal, is it, to be busy, but I hope that you do get some downtime with the family and hopefully enjoy this amazing weather that we're having.
Hope so.
It seems like it's summer take two after that May. I was actually in Greece when we had the last heat wave, so it's nice to be able to be here and hopefully enjoy it. But thank you so much. I really, really appreciate you coming on to the podcast, Theresa. And for our listeners, if you've enjoyed listening to this podcast with Theresa Bell, I really encourage you to subscribe to Word on the Grid. Thank you.
Thank you.